In this video, we're going to show you how to install a knuckle on your Jeep Wrangler located on the driver's side front wheel. The process for this is the same as the passenger side. Using a 19mm socket, go ahead, loosen and remove your lug nuts. Once you remove the lug nuts, remove the wheel and set it aside. On the back side of our caliper, we want to go ahead, loosen and remove the two slide pin bolts. The factory bolts will probably be a 10mm. Our particular bolts here are going to be a 12. Going to loosen and remove these. Pull those out, set them aside. We'll go ahead and pull off our caliper off of the brake rotor and the caliper bracket. The top side of the caliper is going to come back, so I'm going to use a small pry bar. Go on the top, kick this out. Work this back. We're now going to use our hanging hook here. Go inside the hole in the caliper. I'm going to bring this up and hang it up off of the coil spring portion of the frame. Grab the brake rotor, slide that off and set it aside. On our tie rod on here, we want to go ahead and remove the cotter pin that is securing the nut. Now, ours is pretty rusty. Cotter pins are one-time use, so you want to make sure you have a replacement one of these here. We have that pinched together. I'm going to use my cutters. I'm going to grab the other side here and see if we can pull that through. So basically you're going to pinch and pull to try and get that to come out. Use a 17mm socket or wrench. Go ahead, loosen and remove this castle nut. And we're going to go ahead and strike the knuckle here. That should release our tie rod end. On the back of the knuckle, you're going to find your ABS speed sensor right here. There's a 5/16 bolt on the back side securing that. So you want to go ahead, loosen and remove that bolt. We're going to pull our bolt out of it and set that aside. And if you follow this wire up, you want to pull it out of the brackets. So you're just going to pull that down. And there's one on the back side. You're just going to follow this around to pull that down and out. And then pull it out through the back. Using some cutting pliers here, we're going to go ahead and pull out our cotter pin. We're going to grab these here and bend these back down. Cotter pins are a one-time use, so you want to make sure you have a replacement cotter pin ready to go. Just grab this top piece here, and we can just kind of grab, pinch and pull, and work this out. Go ahead and toss that. Remove this here. Using a 36mm socket, let's go ahead and loosen and remove the axle nut. Set that aside. Underneath the axle nut, you're going to find a couple washers here. Once you get these washers here, we'll spin those out and set them aside. At this point here, you want to make sure that your axle spindle is loose in that hub. Ours is free floating, so we're good. If yours is a little bit rusted, you can go ahead and use a punch in the middle here and go ahead and work on this, punching that free, spray it down with some rust penetrant until that is free floating. Loosen and remove all three of the wheel hub bolts. There's one here, one at 12 o'clock, and one down on the other side. Our particular unit is using a 14mm. Go ahead and spin those out and set them aside. Next, we want to go ahead and remove our wheel hub from the knuckle. You can usually use a hammer and tap this around the edge here and work that out. Ours is coming out a little bit easier. You might have to give it a few good whacks to pop that out, but you're going to slide this off. Grab your backing plate and slide that off like so. Pay attention to the way that the backing plate comes off. You want to have the opening for the brake caliper and the bracket to line up. Our next step is to go ahead and pull the axle out of the tube here. So just slide that out, and you want to support this the best you can. Slide that out and set this aside. Go ahead and position the knuckle so you can go ahead and access the cotter pin here. Our cotter pin is pretty rusted. What we want to try and do is get to the head of it here. I'm going to try and pinch and pull to work that old cotter pin out. In our case here, it is just too rusted. The cotter pin is just breaking apart. The next best thing we can do is we're going to take off as much of the old cotter pin as possible. And we'll put our socket on there or a wrench and spin this down. We're going to repeat that process for the lower ball joint here. I'm going to try and bend out those tabs here. See if we can grab that cotter pin and work this out. This is not working either. They're just too rusted. On the upper nut, we're going to go ahead and loosen that. We're using a 22 millimeter wrench. And I'm going to go ahead, we're going to use a component here for leverage. And we want to go ahead and loosen this. Now remember, the cotter pin is in there, so basically what we're doing is literally just shearing off that cotter pin, and we'll remove that once we get the nut off here. Now we just switched over to our ratchet. Speed things up a little bit. On the bottom nut, this is going to be a 32 millimeter. We're going to use our impact gun, loosen and remove this nut. Now we're just going to go ahead and thread on the bottom nut here, just a couple threads. Now we're going to use a hammer and we're going to strike the top of the knuckle. We're going to pop this down off of the ball joints. Go ahead and remove the nut. Set that aside and lower down this unit. Now you have your bracket here for the ABS wire. Go ahead and remove that with it and set it aside. Next thing you want to do is go ahead and use a small punch and go ahead and work those cotter pins out. You can see the cotter pin coming out on the other side. So you want to continue to work this out. You can use your pliers and try and grab those there. There we go. We'll go ahead and repeat this process for the upper ball joint. Now we install our knuckle. I want to go ahead and take our ABS wire plate here. Gonna line this up. Slide this through. And go ahead and get our nut started on the bottom. And what I'm going to do is just run this nut up here on the lower ball joint. Go ahead and put the nut on the upper. Now that we have the lower nut snugged in, let's go ahead and snug this down. Get and torque down the lower nut to 80 foot-pounds. Now when we go ahead and torque this down, I want to make sure that one of these notches in the castle nut lines up with the hole in the ball joint, so we can go ahead and put a cotter pin in. If for some reason it's not lining up, you want to go ahead and continue to tighten the lower nut until the next window in the castle nut opens up. We are very, very close. We're going to do that. We're going to tighten it down just a hair bit more so that that lines up perfect. I'm going to torque the upper nut to 75. And watch for the hole in the ball joint here through the castle nut window. For some reason, if the hole doesn't line up with the window in the castle nut, continue to tighten the nut until the next window opens up. Never loosen the nut to locate the hole in the ball stud here. Install the castle nut on the lower ball joint, feed that through, and we're going to bend over the long tab. Snip off the excess. Install the cotter pin. And cut off the excess. Going to install the axle. You want to kind of support this axle as you feed it in. Fit it inside and work those splines in. You want to install your backing plate. Make sure that the notch opening is facing where the brakes are. Go ahead and line up your wheel hub. Install the large washer, install the wafer washer, install the axle nut. Now I'm just going to thread that in by hand for now. We'll tighten that down a little bit. Go ahead and install one of your hub bolts here. Go ahead and rotate the hub so that that hole in the flange lines up. I'm going to get one of those bolts started by hand. Now I'm not going to tighten this down yet. I just want to get that in there. And then we'll go ahead and line up the other two bolts. Get that started a few threads and just spin it around and get the last bolt in from the other side. Go ahead and torque down these bolts to 75 foot-pounds. Go ahead and pull your ABS wire through underneath the upper ball joint. And there is a little stud right here poking out, the plastic mounting or line-up pin. Go ahead and line this up, put that in, and get our bolt through. And get that started. And once you have that bolt started, go ahead and snug this down. And once that bolt bottoms out, just give it about a quarter turn, and that's it. Now we can go ahead and install our ABS wire here. Push that up into place. I'm going to do the same for the back. I might have to bend that tab down a little bit. Get that to line up. install your tie rod end. Tighten down your outer tie rod here to 35 foot-pounds. You want to watch for the hole in the ball stud right here. Make sure it lines up with the notch in the castle nut. Go ahead and install a new cotter pin. Snip off the excess. Gently snug down the axle nut. We're going to install 2 lug nuts. You want to make sure that these are on 2 studs side by side. Now we're going to rotate this, and we're going to put a pry bar right between here, and that's going to work as a stop while we go ahead and torque down the axle nut. We're going to torque this to 175 foot-pounds. Go ahead and remove the pry bar and remove the lug nuts. Go ahead and take the castle right here. You want to go ahead and line this up on the nut, but you also want to make sure that one of these notches here lines up with the hole in the axle. So it might take a few times to go ahead and clock it or rotate it properly. Go ahead and feed a cotter pin through. Cut off the excess. Install your brake rotor. Go ahead and grab your brake caliper. I'm going to go ahead and line this up. Now when installing the caliper, you want to make sure that the 2 notches on the bottom line up with the slide on the bottom here. And once you have that lined up, we can go ahead and install the 2 slide pin bolts on the back side of the brake caliper. I'm just going to push our bolts in for now, and then you're going to have to grab that caliper and just kind of position it, wiggle it back and forth. You want to get these bolts to line up. Once you get that started, you can go ahead and get the other one lined up here. Once you have that caught a few threads, let's go ahead and snug those down. We're just going to gently snug those down. Torque down the caliper slide pin bolts to 11 foot-pounds. Now that we tighten down our caliper, you want to go ahead and hop into the vehicle, pump up the brakes, make sure that you have a firm pedal. Then we can go ahead and install your wheel. Go ahead and install your wheel. Get our lug nuts threaded on here. Go ahead and torque down your lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.